Governments are often originally designed to protect a group that has a common religious and cultural history. The extent to which a religion influences the cultural profile of a social depends on the degree to which a particular religion is dominant or state sanctioned, the importance that society places on religion, the degree of religious homogeneity in the society, and the degree of tolerance for religious diversity that exists in the society. Some evidence suggests that religious devotion is related to particular cultural values such as tradition, conformity, and benevolence, and future orientation and collectivism. Additional evidence suggests that devotedly religious individuals are more likely to endorse the dominant cultural profile of a society. As societies shift from agrarian to industrial and survival is taken to granted, traditional religious beliefs tend to decline. However, while attendance at religious service has declined, spirituality is on the rise and deep differences along religious lines remain. Although Christianity currently has the largest number of adherents worldwide, its percentage of followers is projected to be relatively stable in the near future, with Islamic religions and Hindus representing an increasing percentage of the world population. Of course, religions are not evenly distributed across the planet, with some religions concentrated in specific geographic regions. For example, Islam is largely concentrated in Asia and Africa, and Shinto existed almost exclusively in Japan. Therefore, obviously, specific religions have a greater influence in some cultures than in others. Religions and ideologies have to do with explanation for things that cannot be scientifically demonstrated as the definition of religion suggests. Numerous other factors can be suggested as a contributor to cultural variation and persistence. For example, Smith and Pearson in 1994 identified the following factors in addition to those mentioned previously. First, climate, topography, and the indigenous economy affect traditions and behavior in the primitive heritage of the modern societies. Proximity and topography affect the exchange of culture among societies because barriers such as mountains and oceans limit the potential for cross-cultural interaction. Economic systems and technology affect the exchange between cultures and hence the transfer of culture. Political boundaries define areas where there is more or less interaction among cultures. Okay. As we learned, various debates regarding culture have emerged because of the ambiguity of the culture. The issues raised are important because they influence the unity of the concept of culture for explaining and predicting behavior in organization. So, first, One concept which is debated is national culture like this. A key question to identifying culture so that its effect on management can be assessed is the extent to which a nation has distinctive culture. In fact, much of the research reports little more than the nation in which respondents live. It should be apparent that based on the definition of culture presented previously, this could be misleading. Multiple cultures can exist within national borders, and the same cultural group can span many nations. For example, Canada is the home to both Anglophones and Francophones, each having distinctive cultures. In this case, Anglophones is a person who speaks English, and Francophones is a person who speaks French. Yet both are Canadian, and their unique appreciation for the dynamic between these two specific subcultures. And the First Nations people of North America span the border of the United States and Canada, and any major North American city will have pockets of many distinct cultures that also exist elsewhere. However, the 19th and 20th centuries saw the emergence of nation states that in many cases were a political expression of cultural similarity. The dynamic between cultural fragmentation and national unity raises the question of the appropriateness of the concept of the national culture. As I mentioned, Hofstede is a top of the scholar in cultural studies. His in 1983 makes a powerful argument in favor of national culture. Hofstede argues that because nations are political entities, they vary in their forms of government, legal systems, educational systems, labor, and employment relations system, all of which reflect a working cultural conscience. In addition, one or a small number of official language characterized most nations, which may be in addition to the one that inhabits land from birth. Many nations are small enough to have relatively similar geographical and ecological conditions that may promote cultural homogeneity. These institutional and geographical factors influence the way in which people interact with their environment and each other and thereby condition the way they think that their mental programming. Nations are social systems and therefore can be cultures. In addition, Hofstede suggests that nationality has a symbolic value to citizens that influences how people perceive themselves. They or derive our self identity from our nationality. What about manager? For manager, law and regulation of sovereign nations govern the activities of firms. Therefore, from an international business perspective, national culture is probably the most logical level of analysis from which to begin to understand the cultural environment. If for practical purposes the concept of national culture is adopted, two major issues must be recognized. As you see, first, by comparing the differences, uh, no, by comparing national cultures, the large number of subcultures that exist within some nations is at risk of being ignored. We must remember that differences of the magnitude observed between any two countries might also be found between selected subcultures within a country. Within any country, cultural differences that are not obvious to the outside observer are not often much more apparent to local nations. Second, we risk ignoring the variation, conflict, and dissent that exist within national cultures. Not only do countries have subcultural, but each individual also have unique life experiences with various local and global culture groups that contribute to diversity within a nation culture. An additional consideration to identifying culture is the extent to which cultures around the world are becoming more similar or more different. The fact that national culture is related to other social factors such as political, legal, education, and labor relations systems lead to suggest that the rapid technological and economic development around the world will have a homogenizing effect on culture. Several scholars who emphasize the process that maintaining culture different cultural traditions respond to rapid technological development. The argument for convergence of cultures hints on the fact that nations are not static entities but develop over time. This development of nation is evident in changes such as the expansion of education, increased occup- occupational diversity, urban intensification, and development of mass communication. Proponents of the convergence perspective suggest that this modernization results from a common economy orientation and eventually lead to common society where differences in ideology will cease to exist. Culture is converged to the point that no difference in values, attitudes, belief, and behavior exists. Despite the cultural convergence, upon close examination they are somewhat less compelling. Although Eckhart found a shift toward post-materialist values related to economic development, this finding does not hold for other elements of culture. Culture is more than just holding post-materialist values. Another variation in national culture that has nothing to do with modernization are probably related to social behavior in much more the same way. Okay, let's see McDonaldization case. The seemingly identical McDonald's restaurants that exist almost everywhere we see. It actually have different meanings and fulfill different social functions in different parts of the world. Although the physical facilities are similar, eating in McDonald's is very different social experience in Japan or China or the US or France. And while some convergence toward Western managerial values are evident in firms in transition economies, The form of this convergence and its effect on managerial behavior is not uniform, nor is the effect on managerial behavior. Moreover, modernization is probably not the linear uniform process that it is sometimes presented to be. Studies of modernization reveal that countries can modernize in different ways at different rates and with different outcomes. Smith and colleague argue that because of the unique origins and complexity of cultures, cultures will evolve in different and unpredictable ways, making the idea of convergence towards some common endpoint highly unlikely. This type of cultural change is called path dependence, while economy development bring pervasive cultural changes. This historical base for a society has an enduring effect on the character of this development. In addition, cultural systems might be able to combine traditional and modern elements in unique way. So, for example, Hong Kong Chinese. Hong Kong Chinese seem to be able to retain their traditional respect for authority while rejecting its fatalism and adopting modern competitiveness while rejecting more via toward sexual promiscuity. And then a final perspective on cultural variation is provided by Cohen in 2001. He argues that while different environments produce different social systems, different environments can produce similar systems, and similar environments can produce vastly different cultures. This results because cultural research stable equilibriums depending on their interaction with not only the physical, but also the social, intercultural, and intracultural aspects of their context. While the physical environment provides a starting place, the social nature of humans leads to multiple possible solutions to environmental issues. And these equilibrium conditions take place within the context of other surrounding culture. So, next one is organizational culture has been various defined as a stable attitude, belief, and values held in common by organization members as shared normative belief and behavioral expectation or a set of goal-directed value, belief, and behavior. In this perspective, organizational culture is somewhat different construct and is composed of different elements that is national culture. In addition, entry to and transmitted of organizational culture occur in different ways and at different times from national culture. Organizational culture occur in different ways and at different times from national culture. You can see this table, which is compared with organizational and national culture. Organizational culture is shared behavior and conditional relationship. Also, it is socialized into it and partly involved. Whereas national culture is shared meaning and unconditional relationship. Moreover, it is born into it and totally immersed. So, it means individuals are only partly involved with an organizational culture as compared to totally immersed in their national culture. However, the influence of organizational norms must be considered in concert with social culture in understanding the case of behavior in organizations. Actually, both organizational culture and national culture are likely to play major roles in how we perceive the change and what we worry about. Understanding these differences is crucial when working with customers around the world, and nationally, a foolproof way to prepare for any change is to stay as flexible as possible. We can spend time trying to figure out when the next change will occur, which is becoming a very real uh, possibility is the near future with innovations such as business intelligence and marketing insights. But in the end, you cannot predict the complexity of the global markets, much less control them. Instead, we should keep our eyes open to change in order to prepare for what's around the corner because it is only by staying curious and open to change that you can prepare for what's next. Next one is accumulation concern the psychological and behavioral changes that occurs in people because of contact with different culture. Most often, it is used to describe the changes in people who relocate from one culture or other. However, accu- acculturation can also occur on a larger collective scale. In collective acculturation, the whole group of Turkish immigrants in the Netherlands or the nation of Japan when controlled by the United States after World War II, as opposite to the individual changes. The gradual process of psychological acculturation that occurs during immigration results in changes in individual behavior, identities, values, and attitudes. For example, in a study of Italian and Greek immigrants to Canada, first generation immigrants exhibited a strong ethnic identification that did their children. Over time, the identification of people with their new country becomes stronger. However, some evidence suggested that these changes might take generations. Bosky in 1991, in a study of two generations of Polish immigrants to Canada, found that after two generation participants' values were more closely aligned to prototypical Polish than to Canadian value profiles. The acculturation patterns of individuals and groups can be influenced by a number of individual differences and situational factors. The entry status of individual their facility in communication in the local language, their personality, and where the immigrants forge relationships on entry with host country nations or co-ethnic all influence acculturation patterns. So, for example, Cosy found that for individuals with high need for cognitive closure. Those who formed initial close relationship with co-ethnics had a strong tendency to adhere to their culture of origin, while those who formed initial close relationships with host nationals shows a stronger tendency to adapt to the nature to the new culture. So we need learn more about the concept of culture and other cultural and social group. So next one, we will learn about the other. No, we will learn about next week. So next time we will talk about more about debate concept of culture and social group. So see you next time. Bye bye.